This lake belongs to Emily, and you'll never use it again. Victoria Harlow. The ruthless HOA president yelled in my face the second I parked my U-Haul at my new lakeside cabin. 3 minutes later, police arrived. 10 minutes later, I was accused of trespassing and threatening the neighborhood. I thought she was just crazy, until I uncovered a massive illegal scheme she'd hidden for years, and that was only the beginning. What happened next? You won't believe it. It was supposed to be my fresh start. The sun was shining, the lake was calm, and my U-Haul was packed tight with everything I owned. My buddies were helping unload boxes into the cabin I just bought, the first place I could finally call mine. Then she appeared, Victoria Harlow. Blonde helmet hair, oversized designer shades stomping toward me like I'd personally insulted her ancestors. "Who let trash like you in here?" she snapped. "One look at how you parked and I knew you're from some broken-down dump, probably raised with no manners, no class. You're going to ruin this entire neighborhood." And before I could even answer, she threw her half-finished iced coffee all over my U-Haul. That's when I realized this wasn't just a neighbor, this was war. Minutes after her tantrum, flashing lights lit up the street. 2 patrol cars rolled in. Victoria marched toward them like she summoned the FBI. "He's a trespasser! A public threat," she shouted. I saw him sneaking around like some convict. Probably lied on his mortgage, probably hiding something. I stood there still holding a box labeled "Kitchen Stunned." One officer calmly asked for my ID and home purchase papers. I had them ready, thank God. They scanned it, looked at each other, then at Victoria. "Ma'am," one of them said, visibly annoyed, "this is the 3rd false report you filed this month." Victoria gasped, furious. "So, you're just going to let that kind of man move in next to me?" I didn't react, not yet. But inside I wasn't just angry, I was awake. Minutes after her tantrum, flashing lights lit up the street. 2 patrol cars rolled in. Victoria marched toward them like she summoned the FBI. "He's a trespasser!" "A public threat," she shouted. "I saw him sneaking around like some convict. Probably lied on his mortgage, probably hiding something." I stood frozen, clutching a box labeled "Kitchen." My heart pounded not from fear but from the sting of her words. Who was I to her? A criminal. A threat. I fought the urge to lash out. The officers asked for my ID and home purchase papers. I had them ready, but inside my thoughts tangled with frustration and disbelief. One officer glanced at Victoria, then sighed. "Ma'am, this is the 3rd false report you filed this month." Victoria gasped, furious. "So, you're just going to let that kind of man move in next to me?" I didn't respond. But inside, I was wide awake, determined to prove I belonged here no matter how hard she tried to push me out. The next morning, I found a letter stuffed into my mailbox, thick, stamped, and ominously official-looking. The header read, "Notice of Contract Violation. Legal action pending." It claimed I'd falsified information on my mortgage, violated HOA zoning rules, and risked immediate forfeiture of my property. It was signed by a law firm I'd never heard of. I called the number disconnected. I Googled, the firm didn't exist. Victoria had forged legal threats. A total bluff dressed up in legal jargon and intimidation. But it worked. I lost sleep, paid a lawyer to review everything. His verdict, it's fake. But it's calculated. She knows how to scare people into backing down. That's when I realized Victoria wasn't just a Karen. She was weaponizing the law. And if I didn't push back soon, I'd drown in paperwork. Or worse. Just when I thought it couldn't escalate further, I found a notice taped to my front door. Grass height violation, $500 fine. Pay or appear. My lawn was 2 inches higher than HOA standard. 2 inches. I hadn't even finished unpacking. By that evening, she'd planted a motion sensor camera facing directly at my front porch. Not her yard, not the street. Mine. Every time I stepped out, the little red light blinked like a sniper scope. Then came anonymous complaints, trash, too close to curb suspicious movement, unauthorized gatherings. I was getting buried in noise, but I knew exactly who was behind it. Victoria Harlow wasn't just annoying anymore. She was building a paper trail one she could weaponize, and I realized if I didn't start documenting everything, I'd be the one buried. It happened on a quiet, winding road near the lake. I was driving home from the grocery store when a black pickup with no plates appeared in my rearview mirror, tailgating inches from my bumper. Panic surged in my chest as the truck suddenly swerved, sideswiping me hard and forcing my car off the road onto gravel. My hands trembled as I regained control. The truck vanished like a ghost, no plates, no witnesses. Only a dented fender and a sinking feeling in my gut. Back home, a fresh scratch shaped like a lightning bolt marred my front door, a clear warning. Victoria wasn't playing games anymore. This was personal. The threat was unmistakable. Get out. Or, next time, it won't be just a dent. Fear pressed down on me, but beneath it burned a fierce resolve. I wouldn't back down, not now. 2 nights later, I returned to my cabin and immediately sensed danger. The faint smell of gas hung in the air. Lights flickered and then went dark. In the basement, the electrical panel was tampered with wires, yanked fuses melted. The water heater vent was loosened, leaking gas. One spark, one careless moment, and everything could explode. This wasn't vandalism. It was an attempt to erase me. No signs of forced entry. Whoever did this had access and time. I reported it to the sheriff, but his shrug and words. Could be faulty. Wiring felt like a slap. That lightning bolt on my door felt like a scream in the silence. Someone wanted me gone. Permanently. But I was not done fighting. Not yet. The next morning, I knocked on Walter's porch, the retired vet 2 houses down, always seen watering tomatoes. He welcomed me with a slow nod. "Figured you'd show up, son," he said. "She's been like this for years. You're just the first one not to run." Over coffee, he told me everything. The lake. It used to be open to everyone. Kids fished there. Families had BBQs. Then, 5 years ago, Victoria became HOA president. Overnight, fences, warning signs, HOA members only. She even fined me $50 for feeding ducks, he said, shaking his head. But then he leaned in, voice low. Here's the part that never sat right with me: that lake was never private. It was always public land, county property. My heart stopped. If that's true, Victoria's entire reign is built on a lie. Across the lake, I found Emily, single mom, 2 kids living in a modest 1-story. She was pushing her daughter on a swing when I walked up. The moment I mentioned the lake, her smile vanished. "She banned us," Emily said quietly. "Claimed we weren't official HOA. Threatened to call CPS if she caught my kids near the water. Her daughter, maybe 6, clutched a rock painted like a turtle." "That's from the lake," Emily whispered. "She used to build castles on that beach. That was her world. Now, the girl stared at the water like it was a memory she wasn't allowed to touch." "She cried for weeks," Emily said, eyes glassy. "Victoria took that from her. From all of us. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about power that destroyed innocence." And suddenly, I knew this fight was no longer just mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not after what Walter and Emily told me. I spread every piece of paperwork I had across my kitchen table: closing docs, HOA bylaws, property maps. I fired up my laptop and started digging. The HOA rules were vague, full of words like stewardship, historic access, exclusive usage. But something was off. Nowhere did it state the HOA actually owned the lake. At 2:13 a.m., I found it. A government database entry from the Department of Natural Resources. The lake was state property, publicly protected, open access, guaranteed by law. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Victoria had built an empire on pure fiction, a lie so bold it went unchecked for years. But not anymore. She picked the wrong guy to lie to. Now I had a target and a legal weapon. First thing the next morning, I called the Department of Natural Resources. After a short wait, I got transferred to a state investigator named Sarah Martinez. Her voice was calm, precise, the kind that doesn't waste words. I explained everything. Victoria, the fake HOA, rules, the restricted access signs, the harassment. She listened silently, then said, "Sir, if what you're saying is true, this isn't just an HOA issue. It's a state violation, potentially federal." I emailed her every document I had. She promised to escalate it immediately. Then she added, "If someone's been charging fees or denying public access, that's illegal. You did the right thing coming to us." For the first time in weeks, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't alone anymore. Now the state was watching Victoria, and the game was about to change. Digging through old HOA newsletters and archived emails on a community server, I struck gold. One PDF buried in an old folder had detailed line items labeled Lake Use Contributions. Birthday parties, $200. Fishing permits, $50 month. Kayak storage, $70. The totals, over $30,000 collected in less than 3 years. There were no tax records, no receipts, no mention in HOA financial reports. It wasn't a community effort, it was a private racket. Victoria Harlow had been running a business on public property disguised as HOA policy. I printed every page, highlighted the totals, and backed them up on 3 drives. This wasn't just HOA overreach, it was fraud, embezzlement, abuse of public land. And I had the receipts. Victoria didn't just break rules, she'd broken the law. As I connected more dots, something didn't add up. Victoria was a tyrant, sure, but this level of coordination, fake legal docs, and long-term racketeering. It smelled bigger. Digging deeper, I found a name buried in HOA board meeting notes. Langston Development Group, a real estate conglomerate. They had quietly purchased several parcels around the lake, then backed out of public records, hidden under shell LLCs. Rumors online said they were lobbying to turn the area into a luxury resort spa, gated docks, private access. And guess who was on their community liaison payroll 3 years ago? Victoria Harlow. She wasn't the queen. She was the pawn, planted to fence off the lake so the wolves could buy the forest. This wasn't a neighborhood feud anymore. It was corporate theft in slow motion. I needed confirmation. So I went to the one man I thought I could trust, Alan Trask, the longtime HOA treasurer. Soft-spoken, friendly, used to give out lemonade at meetings. I told him everything I'd found, the lake's legal status, Victoria's fake fines. Langston Development. At first, he nodded slowly, but when I mentioned Victoria's payroll history, his eyes changed. Cold, calculating. "You've dug too far," he said. "Walk away, for your sake." That's when it hit me. He wasn't surprised. He was in on it. Alan had been funneling HOA votes, pushing policies to give Langston control, all under the radar. This wasn't about neighbors anymore. This was organized corruption, and I had just exposed one of its architects. I walked out shaken but clear. I wasn't fighting Victoria. I was fighting a machine. I barely made it out of Alan's house before my hands started shaking. That look in his eyes wasn't bluff, it was threat. By the time I got home, my mailbox had been ripped open. My backup drive? Gone. The next morning, a dead squirrel was nailed to my fence. Subtlety was over. They wanted fear, so I changed tactics, installed cloud backups, bought hidden cameras, started recording every conversation. I stopped walking with headphones in. I scanned mirrors while driving. This wasn't paranoia anymore, it was survival. Victoria might be the face, but Alan was the shadow, and behind him money, power, influence. They wanted the lake. They wanted silence. But they forgot one thing I wasn't fighting for, just my property anymore. I was fighting for every family they'd tried to erase. And now I had a plan. The annual Lake Day was coming, Victoria's precious PR stunt where she paraded around like a queen, soaking up applause from people too scared to speak. I saw opportunity, a captive audience, and a stage. I reached out to Sarah at the DNR. She confirmed investigators were closing in. I also emailed 3 local reporters, all with the subject line, "Illegal HOA exploiting state property. Documents enclosed." Then I printed everything. Dozens of pages: HOA, lies, forged fees, Langston connections, and more. I organized it into folders marked "Truth for the Community." The plan was simple. Show up, stay calm, and when Victoria steps up to speak, drop the bomb. This wasn't about shouting anymore. It was about exposing her with paperwork proof and the press. Let's see how she handles real power. Lake Day was packed, music, kids' lawn chairs, smiles forced under HOA pressure. Victoria strutted to the mic like a politician. I stood quietly near the back folder in one hand, phone recording in the other. As she boasted about protecting the lake, I stepped forward and said, "You don't own the lake, Victoria. The state does. And here's proof." Gasps, whispers. Cameras turned. She stormed toward me, red-faced, manic. "You want attention?" "Fine," she shrieked, then lunged, grabbed my phone and tried to delete the footage. The moment her hand touched me, she crossed the line. Physical assault. Witnessed. And my phone automatically backed up to the cloud. She screamed. "I built this neighborhood," I replied calmly. "Oh, you built a lie, and now it's crumbling live." The crowd froze. Victoria stood there clutching my phone, panting like a dictator caught on live TV, and then someone yelled, "Call the cops, now." By the time they arrived, I already had the backup footage open on a tablet. It showed everything: the grab, the assault, the confession. One officer reviewed it, jaw tightening. "This isn't harassment anymore. This is physical assault and property damage caught on camera." Victoria started to protest. "She provoked me. He's dangerous." But nobody was buying it anymore. Neighbors whispered. Eyebrows raised. Even her inner circle stepped back. The officer snapped on cuffs. "You're under arrest for assault and filing multiple false police reports." Gasps. A cheer from the back. Victoria Harlow, HOA tyrant, was led away, stunned, silent, no longer untouchable. And for the first time, the community exhaled. 3 days later, the HOA called an emergency meeting. But this time, I wasn't alone. Sarah Martinez from the Department of Natural Resources showed up with a full report. So did 3 reporters and half the neighborhood. As Victoria sat in custody, I stood before the crowd and laid it all out: the fake lake fees, the forged legal threats, the shell corporations. Then, Sarah dropped the bomb: Langston Development illegally purchased restricted shoreline lots using falsified documents aided by HOA board members. Everyone turned to Alan Trask. His face went pale. "This is a state-level fraud investigation," she continued, "and we have evidence." Gasps erupted. Someone shouted, "You sold us out for a resort." Alan tried to speak, but no one was listening anymore. For years, they manipulated everyone. But tonight, truth roared louder than fear. Silence filled the room. Then, one by one, people began to speak. Emily stood up, voice trembling. She threatened to call CPS on me for letting my daughter dip her toes in the lake. "I've lived in fear for 3 years." Walter, cane in hand, added, "She fined me for planting tomatoes too close to the fence." Others followed, dozens. Stories of intimidation, lies, extortion. A woman near the back broke into tears. She told my husband we'd lose our home if we voted against her. What once was a fearful, divided community now stood united against the monster they'd let grow. And as I looked around, I realized this wasn't just about reclaiming a lake. It was about reclaiming dignity, about finally saying, "You don't get to silence us anymore." That night, the neighborhood found its voice. Sarah Martinez stood beside me, raising a single sheet of paper. "This," she said, "is the official land designation from the state of Michigan. The lake is and has always been public property, protected, unrestricted." Gasps turned into applause. Someone yelled, "I knew it." She continued, firm and clear. All fences, signs, and barriers placed by the HOA or any private entity are in violation of state code and must be removed immediately. Every fake rule, every fine, every threat nullified. I looked over at the crowd. Smiles, tears, laughter. One man whispered, "We can finally fish again." Another said, "She stole our summers. Not anymore." In that moment, the lake wasn't just water, it was freedom. Victoria's empire had fallen not with violence, but with a document, a voice, and the truth. Victoria's world crumbled overnight. The expensive sunglasses no longer hid the panic in her eyes. Her husband moved out 2 weeks after the investigation went public, tired of the lies, the lawsuits, the endless fighting. Her social circle evaporated. Former allies refused to return calls. At HOA meetings, she was ignored. At community events, avoided. The media called her the Queen of Deceit. She went from feared to forgotten. One rainy afternoon, I spotted her sitting alone on a bench by the lake, the same lake she tried to own. Her posture was small, fragile. No more screams, no more threats, just silence. Justice had a price, and Victoria was paying it in full. The court ruled swiftly. Victoria faced hefty fines, orders to repay illegally collected fees, and a permanent ban from any HOA leadership. Her house went into foreclosure, drained by legal bills and lost income. No neighbors vouched for her. No friends visited. She was a cautionary tale, a woman who chose control and greed over community and trust. The lake she tried to own was now protected by law and by the people. Victoria's empire was reduced to ashes. Her story spread a warning that power without accountability will always collapse. And as the neighborhood healed, we remembered justice isn't just punishment. It's protection for all. With Victoria gone, the community was eager for a fresh start. Walter, the wise neighbor with decades of experience, was unanimously elected HOA president. His first act, a heartfelt apology to every family Victoria had harassed, fined, or silenced. Under Walter's leadership, the HOA shifted focus from exclusion and fear to inclusion and care. Neighborhood cleanups, family picnics by the lake, kids learning to swim freely. The lake was alive again. No more cameras spying, no more fines for petty reasons. People smiled on the streets, helped each other, and remembered what made this place a special community. The nightmare was over, and in its place, a promise that, together, we could protect this haven. One late evening, I was kayaking, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. Suddenly, I spotted Victoria walking precariously along slippery rocks by the lake. Her foot slipped and she plunged into the cold water, flailing desperately. "Help! I can't swim!" she screamed. For a heartbeat, I hesitated. After all she'd done, the lies, the threats, why risk helping her? But my mother's voice echoed in my mind. Be the person who helps, not the one who hurts. I paddled, quickly grabbed her, and steadied us both. Dragging her to shore, I saw tears streaking her face, raw, vulnerable, broken. In that moment, she wasn't my enemy. She was just a frightened woman. Sitting on the shore, soaked and shivering, Victoria finally whispered, "Why did you save me? After everything I did?" Why, I met her gaze steady and calm. Because justice isn't about revenge. It's about standing for what's right. I fought you because of your actions, not to break you. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks, remorse laid bare. For so long, I thought power was everything. I didn't see what I was destroying. That moment felt like the end of a long war, and maybe the start of something new. Sometimes, fighting isn't about winning. It's about choosing who you want to be. A week later, Victoria appeared on my porch. Her eyes were red-rimmed, voice soft. "I know I have no right to ask this," she said hesitantly. "But can we talk?" She shared her story. Foreclosure, divorce, loneliness. How did I lose everything, she whispered. I thought controlling the lake gave me purpose. But it only destroyed me. I gestured to the chair beside me and she sat cautiously. We sat in silence, letting the moment breathe. Then I said, "You lost a lot, Victoria, but you're still here. That means something." She nodded, fragile hope flickering in her eyes. Sometimes the hardest battles end not with fists, but with understanding. After everything I realized, destroying Victoria wouldn't heal the community. I sat down and wrote a letter to the State Department of Natural Resources. I proposed restoring the HOA's lake privileges, but with strict conditions. No more private control, full public access hours, state permits for all events, permanent ban on Victoria holding any HOA position. Most importantly, the HOA must publicly apologize and commit to community service projects. Weeks later, Sarah called with surprising news. This is the first time we've had a complainant ask to restore privileges under accountability. She called it a model for future cases. I smiled, knowing this wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about leadership, true leadership that serves the community, not controls it. The community's reaction was overwhelming. Families returned to the lake picnics, swimming lessons, fishing trips. Walter, now HOA president, often cried tears of joy at neighborhood gatherings. At one event, a little girl ran up to me clutching a painted rock. "Thank you for saving our lake," she said simply. No banners, no speeches, just gratitude. Neighbors, who once whispered in fear, now smiled freely. Victoria had been the villain, but we were the heroes of this story. Together, we'd reclaimed more than water. We'd reclaimed trust, hope, and community spirit. And as the sun set over the peaceful lake, I knew this was just the beginning of a better chapter. This story reminds us all, when faced with bullying or abuse, standing up for yourself and your community is vital. Lies and wrongdoing may hide in the shadows, but truth has a way of shining through and exposing them. Even the hardest hearts can change when given a chance and met with compassion. True leadership isn't about control or power, it's about acting for the good of everyone, building trust and healing wounds. If this story touched you, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support helps us share more real stories that inspire and empower. Thank you for watching, and remember, you're never alone in fighting for what's right. We'll see you in the next video. Stay strong, stay kind.